Chris, always a pleasure to have you on, my friend. We're a couple of days away from the start of the season. Right now, what's your biggest concern about the roster?
I think it's something that might not necessarily be an issue right now, something that could pop up down the line, and that's injuries, right? We saw how injuries impacted the 2020 season. And I don't know, how much depth this roster has if they were to deal with the wave of injuries, particularly key spots. You look at, receiver behind Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel is Mohamed Sanu and Trent Sherfield. Are those guys going to be good enough to play a starter's role if they need to? I think you could make a similar case with the secondary and what they potentially have behind Emmanuel Mosley and Jason Verrett if those guys were to deal with injuries. And Mosley hasn't practiced this week because of a knee injury. So I think overall just depth and how this team could handle injuries. Otherwise, I think the roster is pretty strong, and there isn't really a position group that you would say is a weak point. I would just say, beyond the starters, there might be some depth concerns if they do have to deal with injuries.
Do you think, like you mentioned Emmanuel Mosley there, is there a chance Josh Norman is starting on Sunday?
There's a chance. I'm not entirely sure. I think, Dante Johnson is somebody they brought back to the practice squad and is somebody who got first-team reps like a couple weeks ago during practice, during the preseason schedule. So I think they might trust him a little bit more just given his experience. And fortunately for them, they're playing a Detroit team that isn't exactly loaded at receiver. So I think if they did have to start Dante Johnson, he would probably get targeted a lot, but I don't know that it would necessarily be a game-deciding problem for them, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Is the running back? You talked a lot about depth there in concerns for the season. Are you is the running back depth good enough?
Yeah, I think this is probably the most talented running back group that Kyle Shanahan's had since he's been here. Trey Sermon is somebody who. He's bigger. Mike McDaniel, the offensive coordinator today, was just talking about his rare cutting ability for somebody his size, and he adds, a size dynamic that they haven't really had. And I think Elijah Mitchell, the rookie 6th-round pick from Louisiana, is somebody who might be a little bit underrated. Didn't really get to play a whole lot in the preseason because of an injury, but I think he's somebody who has an intriguing blend of speed and power to his game, and I think he's a real good fit for this team. So I think in terms of, the three halfbacks they have, the first three, it's probably as talented a group, and they're a little bit younger than they've been too, which has been an issue in recent years with Jerick McKinnon and his injury history, and Kevin Coleman dealing with some injury stuff later in his career when he was here. So I think the combination of youth and talent, I think the 49ers backfield could be pretty explosive, particularly if Raheem Mostert can stay healthy. Then it could be one of the better rushing attacks in the league.
I'm a big Trey Sermon guy, as Kyle Madsen would say. I'm a big Trey Sermon guy. I think he's going to wind up, and maybe this is just me watching Ohio State too much, and I feel like Raheem Mostert has a place, and I think even you referred to him once as like a Porsche. You referred to him as a high-end car. I think there's going to be a point this season where Trey Sermon is getting the bulk of the carries for the 49ers.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be crazy. If there's been sort of a theme of the rushing attack, I think, throughout training camp in the preseason, it's that they want to be more physical. It might be more of a downhill power type approach as opposed to just the wide zone scheme, which Kyle Shanahan is known for. And I think Trey Sermon fits that mold. And you talk about, what the running game could potentially look like with Trey Lance back there. I think there's a lot of opportunity for sort of power-based, more of a gap blocking scheme as opposed to the wide zone stuff, and I think Trey Sermon fits that for sure. And look, Raheem Mostert is he only played in half the games last year. He wears a big knee brace at practice. He's coming off a season which he had a high ankle sprain twice. So it's certainly possible that he does miss some time, and I think the 49ers are insulated this year perhaps better than previous seasons, and I think Trey Sermon is probably a reason why.
Chris Biderman covers the San Francisco 49ers of the Sacramento Bee and Candlestick Chronicles here with us on ESPN 1320. And I'm glad you brought up Trey Lance, Chris, because I've gone as long as I can without asking you about quarterbacks. I think I did good. I went 2 or 3 questions without talking about quarterbacks. I think that's a solid effort on my part. What is the game plan here? Like, I know Kyle's not telling anybody, and I know he's not even, specifically named the starter yet. We all know it's Jimmy Garoppolo. We keep hearing about this two-quarterback system. Like, if you had to guess, what do you think the plan is with Trey Lance moving forward?
I think for Sunday, it's iffy at best, right? I think it's hard to put Trey Lance into a game when he's been wearing a splint for, he wore a splint for a week and took it off on Monday and didn't resume throwing until Wednesday. So I think it's, if Kyle Shanahan's going to put him back there, it would be because he's confident that Lance could throw the ball and not worry about, being tentative at all, having to make those throws because of the finger. If you're a quarterback and you're back in the pocket and you're worried about banging your finger on somebody's helmet, then that to me isn't really a great recipe for success. So I think the 49ers need to gauge as to how comfortable Trey Lance is making those throws. If you see him at practice, he's throwing the ball, but he's not catching the ball and doing anything really with his right hand aside from throwing it and gripping it. So you wonder, if he's going to be incorporated into the running game, is it going to be a liability if he has to hold the ball with the right hand while he's getting hit by NFL defenders for the first time? So in my opinion, I'm not expecting much from Trey Lance in terms of being incorporated in the offense, maybe a handful of plays here and there, but I would expect as he gets healthier, he'll get worked in more and more because Kyle Shanahan has said Trey Lance needs to play because he only got one game of football last year at North Dakota State. So I think for now they're going to be very cautious with him because they know how important he is for the future and not risk it. And that's why you have two quarterbacks. That's why you're paying Jimmy Garoppolo $24 million this year, is just in case Trey Lance isn't ready or he's dealing with an injury. And I think going into week one, that's probably the case.
The line that you just recited from Kyle Shanahan is so interesting to me about him. You can't have him go another year without playing football. With that said, clearly stated by the head coach, do you think Jimmy Garoppolo starts all 17 games?
No, I think at some point this year Trey Lance is going to become the starter. I think that the talent disparity between the two is pretty evident. I think what Jimmy Garoppolo has on Trey Lance now is experience and a certain comfort level within the offense. But I think eventually once Trey Lance does get those reps and does get more comfortable in game action, I think he just lifts the ceiling of the offense to a completely different level, both what he can do with his legs in the running game, the play action game, what he can do as a deep thrower. He's just a much more dynamic quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo, and that's not that the 49ers can't win with Jimmy Garoppolo. We've seen them win with Jimmy Garoppolo, but it's just what I think Jimmy Garoppolo is not the type of quarterback that lifts an offense to a different level. He can function within the offense, but I think Trey Lance is that type of quarterback that could eventually become, what Kyle Shanahan envisions, which is, he's been trying to get a top 5 quarterback in the league, and I think he looks at Trey Lance's skill set and, matching that with what Shanahan can do offensively through schematics and finding matchups and things like that. I think he thinks he can maximize Trey Lance, and he understands that Lance needs to play and needs to develop, and so I think that's going to happen, at some point this season, maybe not right now, maybe not until November, but I think at some point Kyle Shanahan's going to realize he needs to lift the ceiling for his offense, and I think Trey Lance is going to be the answer for that.
Do you think Jimmy's play could – do you think that's an idea in his mind already, or will Jimmy's play influence that?
Oh, it'll certainly influence it. Like if the 49ers are blowing everybody out, then I have a hard time believing Shanahan's going to feel pressed to make a quarterback decision. But if Garoppolo's, making a couple questionable decisions each game and throwing, the interceptions at the rate he was even in 2019, I think it'll certainly be on Shanahan's mind. Because, we've seen Kyle Shanahan do it with people like Robert Griffin, back in 2012. I think he can figure out the type of offense he can run with a rookie quarterback. And I think, if the 49ers defense is as good as they anticipate, then they could play keep away a little bit and be a running team and do a lot of, interesting ground game stuff with Trey Lance. And, I think it's dependent. It's going to be partly dependent on how Garoppolo plays. But if Garoppolo is playing well, it's not a bad problem for Kyle Shanahan to have, in that he has a rookie who he's really high on, but also a starting quarterback who wouldn't necessarily need to be replaced right away in that scenario.
Obviously, 97 is back, but Robert Saleh is gone. Any concerns there that there might be some fall off to that defense that we were talking about a few minutes ago? I feel like all things considered, everything that went wrong for the San Francisco 49ers last year, that defense still did a pretty damn respectable job, but the head of it is now gone.
Yeah, that's one of the unknowns, I think, going into the season. There's been a lot of positive things said about DeMeco Ryans, and everybody has really positive things to say about him, and they say he's going to be a head coach in the league. But the fact is, he's never called a defense in a regular season game yet. So there are those questions. But fortunately for him, he does have a pretty experienced group that he's dealing with, and it could be a really talented group if Nick Bosa and Dee Ford and Javon Kinlaw and those guys in the defensive line, if they're healthy. Then they're going to be able to get after the quarterback, and that could be, a great equalizer for them. If they can't get after the quarterback, then you do wonder how the secondary is going to hold up, because there are some questions there. But I think we'll have to see. Well, in 2018, what was interesting about Robert Saleh and that defense, a lot of people were calling for Robert Saleh's job because there were so many miscommunications in the secondary on the back end, and that was obviously before Nick Bosa and Dee Ford got there. But the point is that defensive coaches or at least assistant coaches, coordinators, they can rise and fall with the way their team plays. And so DeMeco Ryans could be a head coach in the making, or he could be somebody that, fans want replaced if there are miscommunications and snafus like there were throughout 2018 when the defense wasn't playing at that high of a level. So ultimately, I think the players are probably good enough, and the pass rush has the potential to be good enough to mask any deficiencies that Ryans has. But from everything I'm hearing about DeMeco Ryans, everybody is really optimistic and excited about what he could be. And now we'll just have to see if there are going to be any lumps early on in his career as a defensive play caller.
You mentioned his name. We'll make this the last question. Over under 13.5 games played for Dee Ford.
Oh man, that's a tough one. I like Dee personally. It's just back injuries are just really tough, and he's had a lot of them. So he's going to be on a pitch count early on. It might be similar to, how the 49ers used Elvis Dumervil when he was with the team, sort of as a designated pass rusher who really only came in on third down. I think it was in 2018. So, if Dee Ford's playing 10 to 15 snaps a game, then, he's staying healthy, then I think he could play a full season. If the 49ers have to rely on him for more than that, then I think it would be tough to ask to get him to play more than 13 games. But I think that's the reason why they brought in Samson Ebukam, was a guy who's never missed a game in his career, an athletic guy, probably not as refined as a pass rusher as Dee Ford, but I think has a lot of, athletic upside and sort of similar athletic traits to Dee Ford. But, if Ford's playing 40 snaps a game, I would say no. I'm not expecting him to play 40 snaps a game. I think he's probably going to be closer to 15 to 20. And if that's the role, then I think there's a distinct possibility. But back injuries are tricky, and they can come up and at any time, and so it's really tough for me to say.
Have fun this weekend.
I know that's not the answer you're looking for.
No, that's my bold prediction was he's playing the whole. I think I had him at like 15 games, 14 or 15. That was one of my big bold predictions, and Kenny looked at me like I had grown a second head when I said that. So I'm rooting for his health. He obviously when he plays, he's really good. But yeah, I don't know anyone who's recovered from a back injury. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Always a pleasure, man. Have a blast this weekend, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thanks a lot for having me. Appreciate it.